The story began with a man named Tiro Kamashiro, an ordinary employee with plain features, living a dull, uneventful life. Every morning he woke up, went to work, came back home, watched boring news broadcasts, and went to sleep to repeat the same routine the next day. But one night, while staring at his TV screen, a mysterious force believed by people to be a governing power offered him the chance to break that tiresome routine. That force appeared before him, showing him a planet called Medias, where civilizations kept disappearing from time to time. Since this same power also governed another planet called Moses, it saw restoring Medias as its responsibility, though it couldn't intervene directly. So it chose Tiro as its envoy to bring about the revival of that world. Tiro was thrown into confusion. He was just an ordinary worker with no real talent, and he grew more anxious when he thought about his job waiting for him, fearing his boss might fire him if he didn't show up. But the mysterious power explained that he had actually died in his original world the moment he was summoned here, and rejecting the mission would cause his soul to vanish. That's when Tiro realized he had no choice but to accept. The power granted him special abilities, maximizing his magical energy, and asked what else he wanted to add. A shameful worldly desire came to his mind, but the power reassured him that his journey would bring him across many women of various peoples. Then it added to his attributes a search ability, along with several useful skills such as understanding all languages and resistance to poisons, and gave him a bag to store his tools. After that, it hurriedly sent him off to the new world without a goodbye. Tiro opened his eyes to find himself sitting beside a tree in a lush forest. He stood up, observed his surroundings, and decided to look for a place where people lived. He walked for a long time until he spotted a village in the distance. He was starving since his arrival but hesitated to ask for free food. Then he remembered the search ability he'd been given, which could help him collect materials and sell them. Excitedly, he raised his voice to activate it, but nothing happened. Thinking he had pronounced the spell wrong, he wrote its words on the ground in his old language. Symbols suddenly glowed, marking material locations. Leaf icons that looked like clovers, others shaped like diamonds or hearts. He tried the scanning ability on one of the plants and discovered that moonlight grass was a yellow flower that bloomed on full moon nights, classified as rank B. He picked some and stored them in his bag, then moved on collecting other lower-ranked materials. He realized the clover symbol stood for herbs, the heart for living creatures, and the diamond for minerals and rocks. After gathering enough, he headed to the village to sell his goods. At the gate, he was stopped by a guard named Marlowe, who asked about his purpose. Tiro said he was a traveling merchant who collected and sold resources. The guard was impressed and directed him to the general store. On the way, some villagers greeted him, staring curiously at his unusual height and distinctive look. When he entered the shop, he showed his items to the merchant, who was amazed by their quality and assumed Tiro was an expert craftsman. The merchant asked him to bring an ore called Mithyl from a nearby mountain, and bought what Tiro had brought for 300,000 rav, roughly $20,000. He could hardly believe his sudden fortune, but his ambition grew, so he accepted the new job without hesitation, despite the possible dangers awaiting him on the mountain. Before heading out, Tiro decided to rest that night at a small local inn. In his room, a maid came to offer room service and told him the place had no bathrooms. Those were luxuries reserved for nobles. So Tiro improvised, using a cleaning spell that instantly removed all dirt from his body. Yet he didn't feel fully satisfied, nothing compared to the warmth of a long bath as he used to in his old life. The next morning, he set off on his first mission in this strange city. On his way, he used his search skill to gather materials from along the path, not leaving a single useful thing behind. His journey took him to a forest of white trees, known among the locals as the Forest of Ancient Dragons. He was starting to get used to his new life, and while searching, a diamond icon appeared for the first time. Thinking it marked something valuable, he rushed toward it without hesitation. He found a decayed corpse of a fallen warrior, and fear struck him at the sight. Yet curiosity won out, and he cautiously examined the area again. Beside the body, he found a family talisman with no rank. When he opened it, he discovered a letter from the warrior's sister, thanking him for what he had done for them and begging him to come home no matter what. Tiro realized the man would never return, so he buried him by hand and said a short prayer. Before sunset, he chose a place to camp, set up a magical barrier for protection, and built a fire using the stones he'd collected. He mixed some herbs in a small pot and cooked his first meal in this world, pleasantly surprised by its flavor. The next morning, he continued toward the forest's edge, using his search ability to find more resources. He was puzzled by the lack of mining ores that were said to be there, and he noticed the absence of monsters people had warned him about. He wondered if they were avoiding him because of his scent, but considered that a blessing as long as he stayed safe. He ran happily toward the forest's end, but to his surprise, a wide chasm separated him from the mountains. Unable to stop, he fell into the abyss and used all his magic to survive, landing safely inside a cave. Using search again, he found many ores, but no mithril among them. Boosting his magic power, he finally detected mithril, but before he could approach, the cave shook violently. He cast an explosion spell toward the spot he saw, scattering pieces of mithril, managing to collect a few before the shaking began again. Instead of fleeing, he went deeper into the cave, lighting his way with a faint glow. There he found crystal clear water unlike anything he'd ever seen, and checked it using scan magic. It turned out to be high-ranking underground magical water, extremely rare and valuable. Realizing its worth, he decided to taste it. The scan further revealed that the water belonged to an ancient dragon dwelling deep beneath the earth, making him wonder if the creature was still alive. Before long, the water began to ripple violently. The dragon had truly awakened from its slumber. Tiro's high magical energy had disturbed its rest. The dragon rose, water streaming off its body. Tiro instantly knelt and apologized for the trouble, a habit he'd carried from his office days. Introducing himself as a human, he offered his regrets. The dragon, calling itself Vuldios, replied that Tiro's magical power nearly matched its own. Tiro wasn't seeking compliments, but Vuldios asked him for a favor in exchange for a valuable reward. He explained that the still water had stopped his egg from hatching, and he needed Tiro's magical energy to bring it to life. In return, he promised to give Tiro the mithril he was looking for, and guided him to channel his energy into the egg to start incubation. Thinking the egg needed heat to hatch, Tiro infused it with his magic to warm it. But suddenly, a mysterious force engulfed him. The ground trembled, and Vuldios let out a booming laugh. Fear-filled Tiro, was this a trap to kill him? He fell into the water and began to drown, lamenting the cruel fate that brought him death again just when he'd been given a second chance to live. When he closed his eyes thinking it was the end, he found himself before a figure unlike the previous mystical power, some kind of celestial being watching him closely. The being said that anyone who saw a dragon would either flee or faint, but this human had surpassed both fear and sense, so much that his existence alone could change the world's balance. Then the being murmured that since Tiro desired a gentle companion, he would have one. Tiro's vision faded again, and he lost consciousness. When he woke up, he was alive, with Vuldios standing in front of him, and a faint whimper echoed nearby. He turned to see a small dragon jumping toward him, licking him playfully with its dirty tongue. He gently pushed it away, and Vuldios told him to give the newborn a name. Tiro named him Black. Vuldios approved, and asked Tiro to take the hatchling with him, saying Tiro could care for it properly. He gave Tiro the mithril he had come for, and returned to the depths of the water. Tiro had no choice but to accept the responsibility. He washed the little dragon and prepared to leave, asking his new companion if he was ready to join him on his next gathering trip. He left the cave with Black perched on his shoulder, the small dragon fluttering around joyfully, seeing the world for the first time. As sunset approached, Tiro set up camp. Unpacking his gear and noticing that his bag was now filled with high-grade magical water, he remembered Vuldios had breathed special magic into it earlier. Through his magic system, Tiro learned that this water was essential for raising young dragons. He filled a cup and gave it to Black, who in return offered him a small symbolic sip, a gesture of friendship and companionship. Tiro drank it respectfully, finding the taste rather plain despite its immense value. Then he created magical stones and used a firestone to light the campfire. After hours of cooking, he prepared a pot of meat stew for himself and his little dragon, and they ate together happily. Before sleeping, Tiro wondered if Black felt lonely after parting with his parent. The dragon answered with a silent hug, making Tiro realize the little one saw him as his father. A warm feeling of joy filled his heart for the gentle companion fate had given him on his very first day in this strange world. Driven by curiosity, he opened the abilities list and found that Black was actually an ancient dragon of rank B, even stronger than him, which made him feel more responsible toward him. In the morning, Tiro climbed to the surface and noticed the forest looked different from the day before, but he ignored it and continued collecting herbs skillfully as usual. Suddenly, Black hid behind him trembling, and Tiro sensed several monsters approaching. When he turned, a huge rockhawk let out an ear-splitting screech. It was a rank C monster. Tiro wasn't scared. Compared to an ancient dragon like Vuldios, this bird looked like a toy. Confident and determined, he prepared to fight. Imagining roasting its legs over the fire, he summoned a magical shield for defense, then cast 3 ice spears that struck the bird and brought it down. The other monsters soon appeared, and Tiro happily saw them as another source of food. Using speed and hardening spells to boost his power, he launched swift, decisive attacks and defeated them all without even needing a weapon. After the battle ended, Tiro got busy collecting the loot left behind by the monsters when new ones surrounded him again. He found it annoying, realizing that getting back to the village would take days if things kept going like this. Black tried to help by lifting him into the air, but he wasn't strong enough, so Tiro used a weight-reducing spell to make himself lighter, and the two soared high into the sky. Black realized too late what had happened and accidentally let go of his friend, but Tiro landed safely among the tree branches. They continued toward the village, and along the way, Tiro found a branch from a strange high-grade tree in his bag. He wondered why it was there, and who'd put it in. He fiddled with it a little until Black breathed his magic breath on it, turning the branch instantly into a magnificent magic staff. Tiro considered it a new blessing that qualified him for a real challenge. He then heard a deep roar coming from deep in the forest, a sound that would make any sensible person retreat, but Black dashed toward it with excitement, and Tiro followed until they found an elf girl sitting under a tree, exhausted and wounded. It looked like she'd been attacked, but she denied it. Soon, her empty stomach growled loudly, and Tiro realized that the roar he'd heard wasn't a monster's, it was human hunger. The girl told him she hadn't eaten in 3 days and weakly asked for water. Tiro handed her his flask, and she drank every drop, her face regaining color after being pale as death. She thanked him warmly, but hunger soon returned, so he offered her a sandwich from his bag. She devoured it hungrily until a cheerful energy filled her, bringing back her vitality. Tiro asked why her food had run out when she wasn't far from the village. She answered awkwardly, revealing her lack of travel experience. He realized she was a beginner adventurer who hadn't prepared her provisions properly. When she tried to argue, he gently hushed her, pointing out the sweet scent coming from her. The girl took offense at his comment and stormed off angrily without thanking him again. Tiro left the forest as well, and saw a carriage in the distance pulled by a unicorn. Judging from its weak ranking, this kind wasn't rare in that world. The merchant driving the carriage offered to give Tiro and his little dragon a ride to the village, and he gladly accepted. The merchant's children were talkative and started to annoy him, so he jokingly tried to scare them by saying he might be a disguised thief. But the kids just laughed confidently, saying their magical bell would ring if danger approached, yet it remained silent. Tiro was intrigued by the bell, while the family grew more interested in him when they noticed the small dragon on his shoulder. The merchant asked what kind of creature it was, and Tiro replied that it was a small black dragon, without revealing its true identity as an ancient dragon. The merchant was astonished, since dragons were usually companions of chosen knights. He was surprised that such a calm man traveled with such a powerful creature. When they learned that Tiro had hatched the egg himself, their amazement doubled, so Tiro chose silence to avoid further questions. Night fell before they reached the village, so they set up camp near the road. Tiro lit the area with a light spell, and cast a protective barrier to keep monsters away. The family had some doubts about the simple spell's effectiveness, but he reassured them that Black would warn them of any incoming danger. That made them feel safe. Trusting in a dragon's ability to guard them, Lady Eliza offered to prepare dinner for everyone, but Tiro eagerly volunteered to cook himself. His recipe book only had meat soup in it, but he decided to turn it into a full meal for his companions. He pulled out ingredients from his magic bag, impressing the children with his ability to summon things from another dimension. They asked if he was a skilled wizard, but he modestly said he was just an ordinary man. His bag was the special one, not him. After an hour's work, dinner was ready. 3 dishes: grilled steak, his signature meat soup, and a salad of mushrooms and vegetables. The children tasted the food first, followed by their parents, and everyone was amazed by the flavor. The merchant was so impressed that he jokingly thought anyone who could cook like that deserved to be a household head, not just a wandering cook. Tiro simply smiled, puzzled by the mysterious deliciousness he couldn't quite explain. After dinner, the merchant took out his lute and played a gentle, sweet tune, accompanied by his wife's soft, melodious voice, while their children danced joyfully around the fire. Black joined in their fun with childlike playfulness, and soon the children pulled Tiro in to dance with them. In that moment, he felt that the simple happiness he shared with strangers on this warm night far surpassed the lonely peace he once knew in his old world. When dawn broke, Tiro started the day, maintaining his gear, while the merchant and his wife readied the carriage for the trip to the village. They all had a light breakfast, then continued on until they reached the outskirts of Tormy village. At the gate, Tiro got off the carriage and thanked the family for their kind company, and they returned the thanks warmly before heading home deeper into the village. A guard approached Tiro and told him that the family only visited the village in spring and spent winters in the cities, explaining that the merchant sold woven fabrics from other regions. Tiro recalled the sadness he'd seen in the man's eyes and guessed that his trade hadn't gone well this season. He felt grateful for his own ability to gather resources easily and realized that he truly was one of the fortunate ones. He then headed to Jerome's shop, the collector of curiosities, to sell the materials he'd gathered, along with the mythal ore Jerome had requested earlier. Jerome examined the ore carefully, then looked up and declared that it wasn't ordinary mythal, it was rare magical mythal ore. Tiro feigned surprise, though he knew he'd mixed the types on purpose. Jerome explained that this ore was a legendary material unseen for generations, and that the amount Tiro brought was equal in power to all the country's magic stones combined. Tiro was amazed at his own skill's results, but chalked it up to luck. Jerome, however, was convinced he was dealing with a genius resource gatherer, even if the man lacked practical sense. Before they parted, Jerome advised him to travel to Belkheim City, saying it was the center of knowledge and trade, where people like Tiro could become famous and successful. Tiro thought it over, then agreed, deciding to begin a new chapter in his journey. That night, Tiro sat in his inn reading a massive encyclopedia about the world he was living in. He didn't know what the Adventurers Guild was, so he researched it carefully until he understood its system and purpose. He decided to officially join so he could become a registered adventurer, earning money while exploring this beautiful world. He also looked forward to traveling to Belkheim, though he chose to stay a bit longer in the village to wrap up some matters before leaving. At sunrise, he went to the butcher to process the monster meat he'd hunted in the forest. That evening, he invited all the villagers to a feast made from that meat. Everyone gathered around him happily, ate, and thanked him for his generosity. The next day, he ventured out to collect more herbs, planning to leave the following morning. He visited a woman's shop to buy some spices, and when she learned he was leaving, she sadly said everyone would miss him. She wished him luck and gave him provisions she'd made herself. The trip to Belkheim would take about a month, and though Tiro hadn't been in the village long, he had become well loved among its people. Back at the inn, he reflected on the mythal ore he still had left, since he hadn't sold it to Jerome. He sat thinking about what to do with it while Black dozed peacefully, tired from trying to think of something beyond his tiny mind. Then Tiro got an idea to use the precious metal to make something that could help the villagers. He fused the ore with magic and placed it in an oil lamp, which worked perfectly on the first try. At dawn, the villagers gathered at the gate to see him off. Smiles, tears, and well wishes filled the air, and Tiro thanked them them all for their kindness. He brought out the magical lamp and handed it to the guard, explaining that it would create a protective barrier around the village to keep out people with ill intent. The concept, he said, was inspired by the merchant family's magical bell. The villagers hesitated to accept it, but he insisted, saying this place had become his home, and he wanted it to stay safe until he returned someday. As emotions began to overflow, Tiro quickly turned away with Black beside him, not wanting to linger in the weight of goodbyes. They set off on the road to Belkaim, surrounded by calm and the serenity of nature. But peace didn't last long. Just as Tiro commented on how nice the journey was, a massive creature resembling a giant crab blocked their path. He scanned it with a detection spell and discovered it was edible, so he prepared to hunt it, but before he could act, Black darted upward and let out a thunderous shriek that echoed through the forest, killing the crab instantly. Tiro was stunned by the power of his little companion, power he hadn't known before. Before he could collect the prey, more crabs appeared from afar. He thought they were slow-moving, but they came straight toward him with surprising speed. Black saved him at the last second, lifting him high, and the creatures crashed into each other, two of them dying instantly. Tiro landed and finished off the third with his magic staff. He gathered the spoils, built a fire, and used his hardened hand like a knife to slice the meat. Once the stew was ready, they both ate happily, and Tiro smiled at Black, telling him they'd continue their journey together, hunting strange creatures and enjoying food and companionship. After days of walking, they spotted a massive wall in the distance, touching the clouds, and Tiro was awestruck by its grandeur. It was the wall of Belkaim, the great trade city of the Zirio Kingdom, and the gateway to a new phase of his long adventure. Belkaim had originally begun as a small gathering spot for adventurers, but over time it grew into a mid-sized city teeming with skilled and seasoned fighters. As Tiro approached its towering walls, he used his scanning ability and discovered that it held the greatest adventurers guild in the Zirio Kingdom, which fired up his excitement. He noticed a long line of people entering the city where their belongings and bodies were checked before they were allowed in, so he joined the line. When his turn came, he hid Black inside the bag and entered the inspection hall. The guard searched his bag but found nothing suspicious, then asked about his profession. Tiro replied that he was a materials collector. The guard thought he was there to sell goods, but Tiro explained that he wanted to join the guild. The guard used a magical device called Eiffel to reveal the entrance intentions and ensure the city's safety. The result showed that Tiro had no ill will. Curious about what others saw when they scanned him, Tiro tested the Eiffel on himself and found that it read him as having completely average abilities, marked with the color blue, meaning safe. He felt relieved that the skills he'd been granted didn't show up. However, the guard noticed something unusual labeled Dragon's Blessing and asked about it. Tiro brought out Black, explaining that he was his companion, gifted to him by an ancient dragon. The guard didn't object, but asked for proof of ownership. Tiro showed a bracelet given to him by children in a village, claiming it as a sign of ownership. The guard accepted that, but said he would notify the local governor about the dragon's presence in the city. Tiro agreed without objection. Then the guard gave him directions to the guild. Stepping out into the street, Tiro's eyes widened at the vibrant life of Belkaim, the crowded markets, fragrant smells, and the lively bustle of traders and adventurers. He spotted a large rectangular building bearing the guild's emblem and went inside. He looked lost for a moment until a lady named Ariana approached, greeting him with a smile. She explained the place, saying he could trade and connect with others there, but he told her he came to register officially as an adventurer. She sat down to process his registration and handed him the application form. Though fluent in reading and speaking Belkaim's language, he wasn't confident in writing it. But when he wrote using his own native script, the letters automatically turned into local ones, which delighted him. He wrote on the form that he was a resource collector aiming to become an adventurer. Ariana asked about his combat experience, and he mentioned the creatures he had fought. She asked for proof, so he pulled out the giant crab he had just slain. Ariana screamed in shock and called for other adventurers. One of them stepped forward and scanned Tiro with an owl-shaped tool that glowed blue, meaning he wasn't dangerous. Tiro asked what the color meant, and the man explained that blue signified safety. They assumed he came to sell crab shells, but he clarified that he was here to register and planned to eat the crab rather than sell it. The crowd was astonished they hadn't known such creatures could be eaten, and their admiration for him grew. When asked if he had someone with him, he introduced Black, and silence fell in shock. Seeing a person with a dragon, even a small one, was a rare sight. One adventurer invited him to join their team, but Tiro ignored the offer, satisfied with the strong impression he'd already made. Ariana completed the registration and handed him a rank F adventurer badge. He pinned it proudly on his chest, noticing it resembled Black's bracelet. They lightly tapped their badges together, smiling in sync, ready for upcoming adventures in bustling Belkaim. A few days later, Tiro managed to find the family of the warrior whose corpse he had discovered in the Tormy forest. He returned the man's old belongings, and when his family recognized them, they burst into tears. The news hit them hard. Seeing their weakness and illness, Tiro remembered what the city guard had once told him about their hardships. When Tiro entered Belkaim, he had asked about the warrior whose body he'd found earlier, having learned his name from a letter among his belongings, Bill Rhea. The guard told him Bill Rhea had gone on a mission to buy medicine for his ailing father but never returned. Tiro realized the poor man must have died during that mission, which filled him with sorrow and compelled him to do something kind for the family to ease their pain. After helping them, he went to the Adventurers Guild to trade some herbs he had gathered with a furred merchant who looked like a fox. While they talked, Ariana was secretly watching from behind the wall wall. The fox noticed her long ears poking out and asked if something was wrong. She nervously stepped forward and said she'd received a pile of requests from clients, specifically asking for Tiro to take on their jobs, proof that his reputation had spread quickly through the city. Tiro hesitated to accept them all, so he took half and promised to complete them soon. After selling his materials, he went to the bathhouse to relax with Black. Half a month had passed since he arrived in Belkaim, and everything was going smoothly. He remembered his first visit to that public bath when the water was murky, and he'd purified it with cleansing magic until it became crystal clear. Since then, he'd gone there daily to wash off his fatigue. That day, a beastman named Klee approached him, saying he'd heard rumors that Tiro possessed great healing magic. Tiro asked for details, and Klee explained that people were talking about how Tiro had healed a sick man in the slums using magic. It was true Tiro had used healing magic on Bilria's father and family, restoring their health and strength. Tiro admitted it calmly, saying it wasn't a big deal. Klee asked if he'd been paid, and when he learned Tiro had done it for free, he laughed, surprised that someone so kind could exist in such a harsh world. Klee advised him to raise his guild rank so he could take on tougher missions and earn more, but Tiro said he was perfectly content with his current rank. He wasn't seeking money or fame. This worried Klee, who warned him that detachment from worldly things might draw unwanted attention or envy. A few days later, Tiro returned to his usual guild routine, trading what he'd collected. The fox merchant begged him again to raise his rank, insisting that someone with his skills deserved higher-level missions. But once again, Tiro refused, preferring a quiet life. Amid all that, an alarm suddenly rang through the city. Hordes of goblins were advancing toward the walls. Adventurers of rank D and above were mobilized to defend the city, while Tiro tried to slip away since he was technically a low rank. But the guildmaster, Rotor, caught him and dragged him along, fully aware of Tiro's true strength. Rotor laid out a plan to stop the goblins before they crossed the nearby river and gave a rousing speech that fired everyone up. The adventurer teams moved to the battlefield and set up camp atop a mountain ridge to watch all directions. Tiro stayed at the rear with a girl named Muselli, who was trembling with fear at the growls of surrounding monsters. He noticed her unease and tried to calm her down, reminding her that her role as a field healer was critical and that she needed to focus on treating the wounded. He reassured her that fear of the unknown was natural, but people only prove their existence by facing it. Muselli was moved by his words, and a new determination ignited within her. She vowed to do her part with all her strength once the battle began. Klee was also in the camp, and when Tiro saw him, he asked why he was staying in the rear instead of going to the front lines. Klee said he had a deep wound on his back, and among warriors, such a wound was seen as shameful because it meant being injured while fleeing from the enemy. Tiro disagreed, saying that wounds come for many reasons, not all of them cowardly. It was clear from flashbacks that Klee had received that wound while protecting someone else. Tiro told him what really mattered was that he was still alive after such an injury. Klee gave a bitter laugh, wishing the world could see things as Tiro did. Just then, a sudden alarm blared from the front lines. Goblins had broken through the defenses and were heading straight toward Tiro's position. Klee stood up, saying it was time to do what must be done, and bid Tiro farewell before rushing into battle. Looking around, Tiro saw Muselli treating an injured soldier, encouraging him to stay strong with surprising courage. The sight impressed him just minutes ago. She had been trembling behind him, and now her bravery filled him with new strength. He activated his magic armor and raised a barrier around the camp, telling everyone to stay safe until he returned with Klee. Then he grabbed his staff and left. When he reached the battlefield, he strengthened his legs and arms and lunged into a group of goblins, taking them down swiftly. He noticed another team surrounded on all sides and joined them, asking what was happening. They told him they had been attacked by a higher type of goblin, led by a fierce commander who destroyed the first defensive line, and that without Klee, they would have been wiped out. But they'd lost track of him during the fight. Tiro grew worried, realizing Klee must be fighting alone, and dashed off to find him. He found him shortly after, locked in a bloody battle, struggling under the weight of both old and new wounds. Tiro rushed to his side, clearing away some of the attackers to give him breathing room. Klee, angry, asked why he had come. It was too dangerous for someone of his rank. Tiro replied that Klee was the one injured and couldn't keep going like that, urging him to retreat. But Klee refused, saying retreating would open the way for the goblins to attack the city. He insisted on staying and told Tiro to leave, explaining that the goblin commander would follow him wherever he went. Tiro stood watching him fight in pain, feeling sorrow as he saw blood covering his body. The thought of fully healing him crossed his mind, but that would mean touching the wound on his back. He asked if that wound held any special meaning or significance. Klee replied that it was nothing but a reminder of an old folly. Then Tiro summoned Black to fend off the demons and buy them some time, before taking out the magic elemental water from his bag and pouring it over Klee's body. Klee didn't understand what was happening, but he felt immense power surging through his veins, and a spark of excitement reigniting within him. He turned to Tiro in shock, asking what he had done. Tiro told him he had only healed him, but what Klee felt was far beyond simple recovery. Still, it wasn't the right time to talk, so Klee charged back into battle with burning determination, tearing through the demons with his claws in a sweeping assault that ended with their victory. While Klee kept fighting, one of the adventurers approached Tiro, having seen what he did, and asked what kind of magic he used. Tiro downplayed it, saying it was just simple healing, but the adventurer didn't believe him, and asked who he really was. Tiro said he was an F-rank adventurer who only wanted to help, though suspicion lingered in the man's eyes. Since Tiro had saved them that day, the adventurers didn't want to show doubt toward him. They accepted his words and expressed their gratitude, assuring him the guild would reward him appropriately. Tiro returned to his inn, thinking life would soon go back to its usual calm, but his peace didn't last long. Klee came to him after fully recovering. Klee knew what Tiro had done to him wasn't normal healing, so he asked him directly what he had used. Tiro answered that he had healed him using the element of water, explaining that its source came from an ancient dragon. He even told him about Black, and that her mother was that great subterranean dragon. Klee believed him and asked why he would spend such a powerful element on him. Tiro simply replied that it wasn't worth worrying about, though he added to himself that the real reason was that he had plenty of that precious water. Klee sincerely thanked him for what he had done, then asked who he really was and where he came from. Tiro was surprised by the question, remembering the warning he'd been given not to reveal his origin, but he also didn't want his silence to raise suspicion. He hesitated for a long time until Klee noticed his confusion, and gently told him he didn't have to answer, then started to leave. But Tiro stopped him and said that he trusted him and would tell him the truth. He confessed that he had come from another world, that he'd been transported here after dying in his previous one, as if he'd been reborn. Klee smiled, thinking it was just a lighthearted joke, shaking his head in disbelief, but thanked him for his honesty anyway. He went on to explain that what Tiro had done to him was so powerful that his body had momentarily transformed into a dragonut, the highest form of the lizardman race. He had felt an overwhelming surge of power that nearly made him lose control. Even so, he expressed deep gratitude for experiencing the primal strength his kind descended from. Calm as ever, Tiro asked if he had returned to normal. Klee said yes, so Tiro advised him to train in that form so he could learn to control his power. Klee stared at him, puzzled by his composure, saying that this calm nature of his was both admirable and perplexing. Then he said his goodbyes and left. Tiro stepped out into the city streets and saw the bustle of life, the noise of merchants, and the movement of people at every corner. He remembered how much his life had changed since he'd come to this world. As he walked, he saw a weapon shop and stopped, his eyes caught by the gleam of steel behind the glass. The shopkeeper called to him from inside, and Tiro turned with genuine excitement and joy. Takeru asked Ripple if they sold such scissors, but Ripple told him no. Then Ripple asked Takeru if he was the material collector that everyone was talking about, and when she confirmed this, she introduced herself to Takeru and told him that she could also help him, which surprised Takeru. Then Ripple confirmed that they had a master named Grossus, who was a top-notch blacksmith, but he had to bring something the master was looking for. However, Takeru asked if he could know the details. Then they moved to the blacksmith workshop, and Takeru watched the workers making iron, which amazed him greatly. Ripple was also happy and wanted to become like her master, and her dream was to make a sword worthy of a great hero. Then they moved to the master's room and entered. Then Grossus asked Ripple who this was, and Ripple introduced Takeru to Grossus as the resource collector. Then Takeru greeted Grossus, but Grossus told Takeru that he had a very big reputation, which made Takeru grateful to Grossus. However, Ripple thought that Takeru could possibly provide them with Dura ore to make the sword that they would enter in the craftsman's exhibition. But Grossus objected to sending Takeru to the Ryohei mine because it was very dangerous. However, Ripple objected to Grossus's disapproval and told Grossus that Takeru was capable of doing this, but Grossus insisted on his position, which led to an argument between them. Then Ripple grabbed Grossus by his beard and told him to make swords from inferior materials, but after that he wouldn't be called a master. However, Grossus was annoyed by Ripple's words and told her that the mine didn't only have monsters, but there were also rumors about the presence of demons. Ripple also heard some talk about a shortage of Dura ore due to the appearance of demons. Then Grossus said to Takeru that Ripple was a blacksmith who didn't value life and didn't deserve to hold a hammer. Then he also told Ripple that he wouldn't send a young man to his death just because they were in trouble. Then Ripple apologized to Takeru and asked him to forget what she had told him. After that, Takeru presented sweets to Grossus and asked him if the ore he wanted to make swords was in the dangerous Ryohei mine. Then Takeru made an attractive offer to Grossus that if he collected Dura ore for him, he would make him scissors that only he would use, which surprised Grossus and he was amazed by what Takeru said. Then Takeru told them that he could handle anything and showed them a part of a huge monster, which shocked Grossus and Ripple. Ripple said that this monster could only be killed by a B-rank adventurer or higher. Therefore, Takeru asked Grossus to let him handle this task. Then Takeru went to the mine, and while he was on the way, the Dragon Black was humming songs, and Takeru was locating the mine area. Then the Dragon Black approached Takeru and asked him for crab, but Takeru told him that nothing was left, and that he also wanted to eat it again. There was a man and a woman with Takeru in the carriage. The woman talked about strange things happening recently, such as all the poisonous herbs in the Robroy's passage withering overnight. The man also heard about strange disturbances in the tree forests as well. Here Takeru wondered if all this happened because of him, but he didn't believe it. Then Takeru got off the carriage in front of a horse trader's headquarters, and Takeru heard a woman's voice arguing with someone, but Takeru had heard this voice before. Then we moved to the woman who was arguing and asking the trader that she wanted a pure white horse that runs across the sky, but this was a giant white crow, and she pointed to the white animal. However, the trader told Prolite that this was a horse shop, and anything that could transport things they called a horse, whether it was a giant eagle or a white crow, which made Prolite feel embarrassed. She told the trader that she exaggerated her expression, but the trader told her that it was okay, and that no harm was done, and that he should have checked himself. He told her that if she wanted a winged steed, she would find it in Vorzal. However, Prolight wondered if this place was the Dwarf Kingdom. Then Prolight moved there, but Takeru was also going to the same place. Then Takeru asked Black to go slowly and collect some materials on the way, which made Black happy. Then they moved to the forest, and Takeru found a lot of Norit's mushrooms, and it was a real treasure of ingredients. Then he looked in another direction and found Moonlit Night Herb, and was surprised that it was present in large quantities. Then Takeru picked the herb and thought that it took longer than expected, but the results were worth it. However, Prolight was lying on the ground in a state of great fatigue and exhaustion. When Takeru approached her, Prolight asked Takeru to give her water. Then Takeru provided water and food to Prolight until she regained her strength. When she came forward to thank him, her smell was very bad, which annoyed Takeru, and he cast a cleanliness spell on her, which amazed Prolight, and she wondered what was happening to her. However, Takeru told her that he couldn't see the delicate goddess in a state of weakness. Then Prolight introduced herself to Takeru, and Takeru also told Prolight his name. However, Prolight asked Takeru to let her return the favor, but Takeru told her that he didn't expect anything in return and was about to leave. However, Prolight told him that she shouldn't neglect what he did for her, but Takeru wanted to leave, but Prolight appeared in front of him and offered to help him with what he was doing. Black welcomed her very much, and Prolight thought the dragon agreed to her joining them. Then Takeru agreed to her joining them and told her that she would be with them until they reached the next town. Takeru continued collecting resources, and Prolight came to him and told him she found something important. When she showed this thing to him, Takeru told her it was just a rock, which shocked her. When she showed him something else, Takeru told her it was feces, but she continued showing him things until she showed him a poisonous mushroom. When Takeru revealed to her that it was a poisonous mushroom, she and Black started laughing. Here Takeru thought her mind matched Black's mind a lot. After that, night fell on them, and Prolight told Takeru that she would go to get some firewood to light the fire. However, Takeru told Prolight that he had a stone that would serve the purpose. But Prolight told Takeru that this stone was very important and that she would go get the firewood, and she left. Then she returned to them with a tree trunk, which surprised Takeru. However, Prolight told him it would serve the purpose, and threw the trunk upward, and flew high, and directed several strikes at the trunk with her weapon, which turned it into a large amount of firewood. Then she landed on the ground, which amazed Takeru, and he was more amazed by Prolight's weapon, and examined it. He was astonished when he learned that this weapon was A rank, because it was the first time he saw one up close. After that, Takeru prepared food for them, and Prolight was very hungry, and so was Black. When Prolight ate the food, she was very amazed because it was delicious, and thanked him for the food a lot because it tasted wonderful. Black also liked the food, which made Takeru laugh at their behavior. Then Prolight asked Takeru if he was also heading to Vorzal. Takeru said he was going there to search for Dura ore from the mine. Then Prolight asked why she was going there. Then Prolight remembered something and told him that she was going there to find the white-winged horse that her sister Ryutkara longed for. But Takeru's hair ruined the mood. But Prolight told Takeru that she had eaten his food again, and that returning the favor increases every minute. Then Takeru offered Prolight to hire her as a warrior to protect him, which surprised Prolight, and she asked Takeru, "Do you want me to protect you, my lord, from the evil ones?" Right? Takeru confirmed this, and told her that he also wanted someone to do other things for him, like the campfire trick. But Prolight was shocked by Takeru's request because they were very simple requests. But she saw that the reasons that brought them together were a good sign for her, and Brolati agreed to Takeru's offer and told him that she would be his personal guard, and they shook hands. Then Prolight and Black went to sleep, but Takeru couldn't sleep because of the sound of their snoring. The next day, they continued advancing until they reached the river, and Prolight told Takeru that the Dwarf Kingdom is located beyond this river, and this is the Ryohei mountain range. But Takeru saw that the mountains resembled the Hotaka mountains in his homeland. Then they moved to a restaurant, and meat dishes were served to them from the restaurant, and Takeru started eating the meat, and it tasted very good. Prolight was also amazed by the taste of the meat, and said it was delicious, as her friend said. Takeru asked Prolight if her friend was also from the elves, but Prolight's friend was from the lizards. But Takeru told her that he knows a man from the lizards too. Then Prolight spoke the name of her lizard friend, who is the honorary dragon king, and he is a sacred dragon knight, and he is now heading to Belkaim. Prolight believed that Takeru had met him before. Then someone spoke from behind Takeru and told Prolight that the matter is deeper than just a meeting. Then Takeru looked behind him and saw Clay sitting eating food too. Then Clay told them that my girlfriend's friend is now my friend, and Prolight missed Clay a lot. But Clay said to Takeru that he left town without telling him. But Takeru told Clay that he told the guild that he would be away for a while. But Clay told him that he was still mysterious and asked him, "Where are you heading?" When Clay learned that Takeru was going to the mine, he told him that this mine is dangerous and not suitable for his rank. But Takeru saw that Grossus was in trouble and that he couldn't ignore this. But Clay told Takero that this place is very dangerous and that he must get a big reward or he will regret it. But Takero assured Clay that he would get a big reward and that Grossus promised him that he would make him a set of absolute scissors. Clay was surprised, but Takero wanted to win the favor of a very skilled blacksmith because he might get a cooking pot or a fancy frying pan. But Clay doesn't know if he's kind-hearted or naive. But for Takero, scissors are better than a sword because he's a resource gatherer. Then Takero thought they should go, but Brolite wanted to eat dessert. But Takero asked, "How much can you eat?" Then Clay said he would accompany them too, which surprised Takero. But Clay will go there to fix his spear too. But Brolite thought that Clay would be another guard for Takero, which annoyed Takero from saying this. But Clay asked with surprise, "Is Brolite a personal guard?" Brolite said that she is Takero's personal guard, and he is on his way to Vos Raoul. But Clay joined them as a personal guard to Takero too. But Takero thought that Clay is a very grumpy old man, and that Brolite is a hopeless elf, but they are very skilled. Then they moved to the city entrance, but there was a large number of people waiting. But Clay was talking to one of the guards, and after that Clay pointed to his friends. And after that they were able to enter, which surprised Takero. Then he asked class, "How did you let us in?" But Clay told him that he greeted one of his friends. When they saw the entire city, they felt amazed by this because it's an underground city. But the guard told Clay that the king wants to see him. But Takero asked Clay if he has a relationship with the king, but Clay told Takero that it's a complicated relationship. But the guard told Takero that Clay is the one who saved them from the attack of the Thunder King Zingun. But Clay told Takero that the matter is not that important, and also told him that the dwarves are skilled in blacksmithing and incapable of using weapons, and they were forced to pay tribute to the demon lord. But when the demon saw Clay, he fled. Then they continued walking, and the guard said that because of their admiration for Clay, they created this statue for him, which amazed everyone. But Clay asked him to excuse him from this. But Takero told Clay that the statue doesn't look like you, so don't be embarrassed. Then we moved to the king's headquarters, and the king said to Clay that he hasn't seen him in a long time. But Clay asked the king, "What's the story of this statue outside?" But the king thought it was great. But Clay approached the king and asked him, "Why did you make it?" And he felt angry, and Brolite saw that the king and Clay are very close. Then Takero spoke and welcomed the king, and introduced himself to him, and told him that he has a message for him. Then the king's assistant read the letter and told the king that it was from Grossus the blacksmith, and the king knew him well. Then the king's assistant continued reading the letter, and told the king that Grossus wants the king to approve Takero's going to the Ryohei mine. But the king told Takero that months ago, that mine became a haven for demons, after the earth was shaken by a big tremor. And the king asked Takero, "Are you aware of something like this, and insist on entering the mine too?" But Takero confirmed that he wants this too. Then Clay intervened in the conversation, and told the king that Takero is under his protection, and this elf warrior Brolite is skilled in combat too, so there's no need to worry. Here the king was reassured because Clay is with him. Then the king assigned Clay and his friends to explore the mine and the truth about the demons. But Clay agreed to this, but Takero said he doesn't agree, and that he just wants to collect some draw ore materials. But Clay agreed again to that, which annoyed Takero. Then they moved to the mine entrance. Then a guard named Zambo joined them, and he will be their guide inside the mine. Then Zambo opened the door for them, but Brolite saw that the place is dark. But Takero cast a spell to light up the place. Then he received the map from Zambo and cast a reading spell to understand what's in it, which amazed Brolite that he cast 2 spells at once. But Clay asked Takero not to do strange things again. But Takero didn't pay attention to their talk and searched for draw ore in the place, and several types of mineral ores appeared to him, but their signals are very weak. Then Zambo approached Takero and asked him if he notices this just by looking. But Takero asked them to penetrate inside a little, but Black felt something, which made everyone ready to fight. But Clay asked Takero to stay behind them because there's something coming to them, but they don't see it. But Takero cast a search spell until a strange body approaching them appeared. Then 2 monsters attacked them, and Clay attacked the first one and killed it. Then Takero cast a spell that fixed the other one in place, and asked Brolite to finish it off. And Brolite succeeded in this, but she felt happy and asked Takero how he was able to use this wonderful spell. After that they continued advancing, and Takero expected that the magic concentration here is strong, and there are traces of draw ore too in some places. But Takero stopped and headed to a dead end, but there were draw ores that he needed. Then Takero asked Zambo to use his special method of extracting minerals, and asked them to stay away from the walls. Then Takero cast his magic and used fire too, and blew up the walls until a large amount of draw ore appeared to him, which amazed Zambo. But this ore is drite, and it's very rare. Then Takero examined it and found that Zambo was right. Also, Clay felt a large magical energy, and it almost seems to be a magic stone too. But Takero thought there was a pocket containing a magic core in this tunnel. Then Black told Takero about something coming, which shocked Takero. Then the rest approached Takero and Brolite asked about the matter. When they heard a sound, Clay asked, "What is this sound?" But Zambo told them that this is the cursed demon. But Takero asked them to let him. He will take care of this monster. But Clay saw that this is madness from him. But Takero told them that he needs this. Then the monster appeared to them, and it's a giant crab, which made Takero and Black very happy.